It's been, since this year started, about $32 billion of ETF inflows. Since President Trump was elected, about $8 billion of ETF inflows. And to put that in context, there's been on the year about almost $6 billion of outflows in gold ETFs. Now they've picked up recently, but yeah, so to me, that's from a commodity standpoint, this is what's happening. I think is 100,000 is pretty good resistance. It's a milestone. I think it really brings into the forefront, but it's also showing the major paradigm shift of holding gold without Bitcoin in that space is just remiss. You have to have some Bitcoin in there or you're risk of missing out. So today, key thing I've been watching today is the ounces of gold per one Bitcoin made a new high up to 39. Right now it's about 38. And questions what stops that trajectory from going higher?
Mike, give us a sense of how you think it might be reasonable to try to value a commodity or a currency like Bitcoin. Do I look at it relative to, I don't know, pork bellies or gold?
He's laughing at you right now.
Yeah, what do I do there?
Because Paul, I enjoy the question. I'm a bit snickering because it's like right now it's animal spirits. It's the way I always look at commodities supply and demand. Now that's one thing about Bitcoin. It has definable diminishing supply. Basically, the amount you can only mine a day is 450 Bitcoins, and that's going to be cut in half in 2028. And it's just the way it's set up. And there's increasing demand and adoption. So price must go over time, and it's just going to have these nuances. But right now, it's about the major shift in this country from being really pushing against cryptos, as we saw with Gary Gensler, now shifting over to a whole government that's so much positive cryptos. And you see things like the potential for us to be the USA if you actually sell gold and buy Bitcoin, which I think is a bit wild. But that was a Bloomberg story that really hit the tape this weekend. So. And then quotes from Chairman Powell pointing out it's digital gold, and even from President Putin, there's nothing that can really stop it. It's the animal spirits right now, but it's the key thing I'm worried about is now that we have it into the mainstream and all the ETFs people are buying and adding to the portfolio, we still haven't seen the big test of how Bitcoin responds after President Trump has been elected, when the stock market goes down. And, at some point it will. And it hasn't been through that. So right now, I think what you're seeing is a lot of people are adding it to they're getting off zero, but it's still a highly speculative digital asset, basically trades about 3 times the volatility of the S&P 500 and gold.
Oh, wow. I did not know that stat. When we had the optimism from Paul Atkins now being the nominee for SEC, what regulation, what do you think the crypto guys were so pumped about? That it was him versus a Gary Gensler? Like, what kind of regulation either needs to be rolled back or needs to happen in general?
I think, Alex, it's the stop of the pushback. There was significant pushback. Look how, the crypto people had to go to court to get ETFs launched. And these things have been in the works for a decade. It was just kind of silly. Those of us who trade commodity ETFs forever show they're much more risky than a Bitcoin ETF. So it was just silly, some of the extreme regulation that pushed against it. And the bottom line that always really kind of flummoxed me was this space adopted the dollar as its base layer. And that's one thing I always say, well, if you're an American, why would you push back on that? And I think that's what's happened. We've had no zealot like a convert, Mr. Trump shifting over to being much more of a convert. And the key thing I like to point out is today, we're all talking about Bitcoin, but if you look at the trading volume in cryptos, Tether, that dollar token is trading almost 3 times the volume of Bitcoin, and its market cap is about 130 billion. I remember first talking about in 2018, it was only 2 billion. It's just the technology is overwhelming, and it's really favorable for the U.S. and for the dollar.